Joining us is a man who is no stranger to the Observer. Let's say a pleasant good evening to UNC Shadow Minister of Energy. He's also the Opposition Chief Whip and Point of Peer MP, Dr. David Lee. Pleasant good evening, friend.
Pleasant good evening to you, Mikee K, your viewers, your listeners, and your great program.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, congratulations are in order. You, of course, clinching Deputy Political Leader for the United National Congress.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes. Getting into what's happening as far as the Petrotrin, there seems to be, and I'm reading from an article written by a man who's also no stranger here to the Observer, Mr. Veteran journalist Ken Alley. He says that the OWTU, which represented the more than 5,000 workers sent home in November 28, has had its subsidiary Patriotic Energies and Technologies Company Limited, snubbed for a third time. He said altogether, the 9 Trinidad and Tobago firms spent millions of dollars on their respective tenders, which included detailed technical reports and financing proposals. And of course, today we're hearing from the OWTU head, Mr. Ansel Roger, saying that the process, he slammed the process being not transparent, and he said it's a primary national asset as it's their private, it's something that they themselves hold close to their heart. What are we looking at here, Dr. Lee?
Well, firstly, Mikey K, I want to start off by saying tonight I have a problem with the constant disrespect and disregard that this government has persistently shown to the OWTU and its members who built that refinery. It was really their sweat and blood and hard work of the OWTU that ensured that the success of that Petrotrin refinery. Yet twice this government used them again as a political football by promising to sell them that refinery. And you heard from there was a press conference by the president of OWTU, Mr. Roger, really, condemning this government against again of the lack of transparency and accountability to people in respect to that refinery. And this Rowley government again is dangling the refinery again in front of the eyes of this country. So what we have witnessed last week, I don't know if you want to talk about, is this Indian businessman, Mr. Jindal, who suddenly appears out of nowhere, supposedly, quote unquote, out of nowhere, and according to this government and Minister Stuart Young and the Prime Minister, that Mr. Jindal has an interest in the refinery. Um, and where did Mr. Jindal all of a sudden pop out of thin air? I would say no. Last night at our meeting in our UNC headquarters, the opposition leader exposed this Mr. Jindal, who has been in our country having discussions with Stuart Young since March of 2023, Mikee K. So Mr. Jindal did not just pop out of thin air as what the Prime Minister is trying to give an impression to the country that when on his trip to India back in May, that Mr. Jindal suddenly appeared and he was invited into Trinidad to have discussions with the government, inclusive of Stuart Young and Prime Minister Rowley, and has shown an interest in the refinery. That is not so. Mr. Jindal had paid a courtesy call in the Ministry of Energy and had discussions with Stuart Young back as March 2023. So this government needs to come clean with this population on Mr. Jindal's interest in the refinery, Mr. Jindal's association with the Maduro government of Venezuela, and Mr. Jindal's association with Prime Minister Rowley and Stuart Young. There is a triangle that is taking place, and the triangle is India, Mr. Jindal, Venezuela, Mr. Maduro, and Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Rowley and Stuart Young. And they need to come clean with the population, because election is in the air again. Every time election is in the air, Mikee K, this refinery pops up. The discussion of the refinery pops up, and we heard Prime Minister Rowley saying that sometime in August, the decision will be taken on the refinery. And again, the population is being fooled once again by Stuart Young and Prime Minister Rowley.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter also remains is that there was no known formal tender process. I mean, this came out from, well, not from nowhere, because as you mentioned, there have been talks going on for quite some time. But again, the process itself seem to be cloaked in all of this secrecy, and you have the government sort of downplaying those charges on Mr. Jindal, where you have the Energy Minister Stuart Young speaking about those in the opposition sitting across in Parliament. But what does that have to do with the fact of the matter
Well, you
that
see,
something
the,
as a, go ahead.
Stuart Young conveniently tries to talk about he's the only man in this country that has integrity. He and Prime Minister Rowley, and it suits them when who they can talk to, who has integrity, who doesn't have integrity, who is before the court and who is not. He changes it flippantly to suit his own narrative and his government, Mikee K. Stuart Young should be the last person to talk about integrity, and who has integrity and who doesn't have integrity. I mean, this is Stuart Young, has been playing with Maduro, who is sanctioned by the American government. He brought in Delcy Rodriguez back in during COVID with energy on a sanctioned plane, filled with energy officials coming to meet Prime Minister Rowley during COVID, opened the borders, and when they went into the diplomatic center, Prime Minister Rowley says he was not aware of who was coming to meet him. What Nancy story that Prime Minister Rowley and Stuart Young keeps giving this population, and the population keeps being fooled and gullible by the actions of Prime Minister Rowley and Stuart Young. Nobody will just come to meet a Prime Minister just so and he welcomes them and he doesn't know who is going to come in a diplomatic center to meet him. Mikee K. I mean, those are lies, and we keep falling for it. And the chambers don't ask the hard questions. The media doesn't ask the hard questions because I think they're afraid, and we had discussion before, of Rowley and his government.
Yeah, but it still remains the fact that when you look at the rich history of Petrotrin, I mean, coming through the struggles, coming through the trade unions and what have you, and what it represents for Trinidad and Tobago, one would think that there would be some sort of vetting process, a very serious one that is, because first of all, let me ask you, as it stands now, the refinery is not going to be a turnkey operation. So again,
No,
what would be the plans as far as expansion, and how does it fit into Mr. Jindal when you look at his history of how it is that he operates where business is concerned?
I just want to stick a pin here, Mikee K. When Patriotic Technologies / OWTU had put forward a refinery purchase or lease proposal back in 2019, Mikee K, if this government would have had accepted that proposal, which they gave the assurance at OWTU that they would, this country would have been in a far better position today as far as our oil and our oil production in our country and that refinery. So anybody who is offering to purchase or release that refinery now, after 6 years that has been mothballed, it has to be at a lower price than what OWTU was offering this government back in 2019, Mikee K. So that 6 years have lapsed. It is more scrap. It will require a lot of capital injection to make that refinery safe and operational. So anyone who is offering it now is 6 years later that that proposal would be far less than what would have been offered back in 2019 by OWTU. And Mr. Jindal does not have oil. Where is Mr. Jindal getting the oil to bring into the refinery if he is the one that Rowley wants to sell the refinery to? Where is he getting the oil? Is he getting the oil from Maduro and Venezuela? Where is he getting the oil? Because Rowley is saying that we don't produce the amount of oil that is required in the refinery, and whoever is offering to purchase the refinery, they have to show the government where they're getting the oil to put in the refinery. Where is Jindal getting this oil from? Is it from Venezuela? We ask. The opposition asking, is it from Venezuela and Maduro?
The question still lies here. I mean, when you look at it, and you take a serious look at this here, Dr. Lee, there are so many questions. Number one, as far as employees, the employees, the major percentage of employees, are they going to be locals, professional source right here? Is any of the profit going to stay here or basically go back to India? And one would think with an election right around the corner, general election, that these things will be made a priority as far as to, even if it's an optical illusion, that the electorate would have to buy into, that the government would do their best to cross their T's and dot their I's and see how best they can set things up. Because again, where is the main source of employment? Is it going to be our local people? Is this money going to be moving out of the country? Are we still going to be affected with this forex matter? And all of these questions need to be answered. And why? Why then, with such a rich history, when you go back to George Weeks and all that, and Texaco and everything, the history of all of this, that the government would settle with someone like Mr. Jindal when it comes to our refinery?
And those are excellent points you have raised, Mikee K, which we are asking this government to come clean and tell us what is the deal that you want to accept from Mr. Jindal. We want to ask this government also to add to your concerns, to produce the exact terms of his deal, Jindal's deal, so we can compare it against the OWT and patriotic offer. This government has to come clean on that refinery, because the refinery is one thing, but that real estate that refinery sits on belongs to you and I and your listeners and viewers, Mikee K. We cannot just give away our real estate that refinery. This government tried to do it with Naikwan, and you remember what happened to Naikwan and that disaster, what is called Naikwan. Right, Mikee K? Right. And the issue I want to say here, before we end, I know time is running out, that Jindal's main source of operation is iron and steel. So I would not be surprised, and I had asked in the media review, because the chairman of Point Lisas had a release that by the ending of June, what we know as the iron and steel plant that was shut down because of lack of gas, a new operator will come on board by the ending of June. So I am asking the question, is it also Mr. Jindal? Because we saw yesterday being exposed that Mr. Jindal has gotten the operations of the largest iron and steel plant in Venezuela in March of this year. And that's his core kind of business. So we are asking, is he going to get the iron and steel plant also as a sweetener or filler to the refinery that is being put on the table by Mr. Jindal? And if he does get that iron and steel plant, where is he getting the gas to operate that iron and steel plant? And that was the main reason why the iron and steel plant was shut down about 8 years ago when this government took office back in 2015, 2016, Mikee K. So Mr. Jindal has a lot to answer to the population of the country, and I'm asking your listeners, do not be fooled by Rowley and Stuart Young.
And again, I have to ask you, before we head into something else, are you surprised that the OWTU Patriotic Energies and Technologies was snubbed?
I am not surprised, because I've seen it twice before. When in 2020, in between 2018 and 2020, Mikee K, they put that in front of OWTU that they were going to get it, and if I stand to be corrected, I felt they felt strongly they were going to get it because the election was in the air, and as soon as that fridge door was closed, meaning the election was over, you saw what happened, and the proof is in the pudding that OWTU has not gotten anything from this government as promised, and they have spent millions. President Roger has said they have spent millions in putting forward proposals in purchasing or leasing that refinery. It is not done they have to cross their T's and dot their I's. They have to show this country where they're getting the kind of capital to inject in that refinery. So it has cost them millions of dollars.
Now, let me ask you, in the capacity of as opposition chief whip and deputy political leader, the opposition leader Kamla Prasad Bisesa has made it quite clear to give Mr. Dr. Rai Ragba a chance to say why he broke ranks, and she made it quite clear she's not engaging in any backing out. She said she called on both slates and their supporters from the party's recent internal election to forgive and move forward. However, in today's press conference by the member for Kamuto Manzanilla, Dr. Rai Ragba, he made it quite clear. He said he had heard statements by Chief Whip David Lee accusing him of neglecting to attend parliamentary caucus meetings. He categorically denied this, and he asked the Chief Whip to provide evidence that any parliamentary caucus on this issue was held and that he was informed of it.
Mikee K, I don't want to. I said it last night in my presentation that I have the evidence, we have the timelines. This whistleblower piece of legislation goes back in the 12th Parliament as far back as 2022, Mikee K. And in 2022, when this government brought that piece of legislation to be debated, all of us had gotten the research briefs and Hansards of going back into of the 11th Parliament. Mr. Rai Ragbi has been attending our caucuses all the time. The only time Mr. Ragbi and his team stopped is when this internal fight took place. They stopped coming to our parliamentary caucuses, our conference room, so that they would never been aware that what was taking place in our caucuses because they stopped coming. Mr. Ragbi spends his time over the last 5 or 6 weeks in the tea room in Parliament. Now the question has to be asked of Mr. Ragbir, of Rai Ragbir, how come the other members of his team voted with the whip on that fateful day last week, Friday? And there was an article in the media by Gayelle Alexander in The Guardian where Mr. Ragbir said he would fall under the whip. He said that. Mr. Parrish said that. All his team said they would fall. The elections are over and they will come back under the whip. So if Mr. Parry could have voted with the whip on Friday, Mr. Rambly, Mr. Charles, after I voted against this piece of legislation because of what damage and the bad law of this government just removing the 3/5 of the whistleblower legislation and wanted the country to accept that. And after myself, Mr. Charles was the first person after myself. He voted with the opposition in saying, no, we will not accept this piece of legislation. After Mr. Charles, the next member of their team would have been Mr. Parry. He voted with the whip. And after Mr. Parry would have been Mr. Rambly, who was next to Mr. Ragdir. So it's not to say he didn't know how we were voting. How those members of his team voted with the opposition.
The opposition leader also mentioned, she said that, of course, she called for a closure of party ranks in preparation for general elections. And taking in consideration the fact that, a press release came out today from Dr. Ragbe making these statements as far as he was never, of course, notified. He was in the dark about it. There are other issues concerning members that should be brought forward rather than setting up a disciplinary committee to deal with him. When you look at some of these statements, are you getting that sort of perception that there are some people who are just hell-bent on not just falling into line and preparing for when the bell rings?
Well, Mr. Ragbir is on a collision course. I don't know why MP Ragbir is on a collision course. And I want to ask Mr. Ragbir, is it all those meetings that he's meeting down in a place in Chagaramas with certain PNM people? Is it out of that is why we are seeing your actions today? There's a lot more that needs to come out here, Mr. Mikee K, but tonight your program is not that, and that will be brought out in due course. It will come out in due course.
Yeah, and of course, there are many people who echo the sentiments that yes, these things can be embarrassing, but it is not strong enough to destabilize the UNC or derail the UNC going into the general elections. What say you? Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. We have just come out of I would say, a very brutal internal elections. The star team solidified the position with Kamla Prasad Bissessa. We were able to bring out 18,000 plus members of the UNC in a 10-hour day. From 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 18,000 people came out in support to cast their vote. The star team got over 13,000, between 13,500 votes casted for the star team. I mean, that says a lot of what is how our party is vibrant. Mikee K, they sent a strong message to the other side that we are with Mrs. Prasad Bissessa. She's the only person who will take us into government in the next 12 months. And a strong UNC, and we have done the work, Mikee K. The parliamentary colleagues have done the hard work in Parliament, in and out of Parliament. We have been very active. You know the amount of press conferences that we have been holding twice weekly, our Monday night meetings that we have been holding in the last 4 years is second to none to any political party in our country. And for 12 months on the horizon for a general election, for some individuals who does not realize the internal election is over and is still suffering from a tabanka, Mikee K, it really spells whether or not Mr. Ragbir is being pushed by the other side, which is the PNM, to continue that collision course that he's on.
Yeah. Closing comments. Go right ahead.
Mikee K, I just want to say that the elections is over, our internal election is over, our focus is on our general election. We are ready whenever that bell is called. And the focus really and truly, I want to tell your listeners, do not lose sight and stay focused on that Point of Pear refinery. That is something is going to happen. And we have to hold Rowley and Stuart Young to account.
Yeah, thank you so much. Keep up the good work. Best of luck to you and your entire team, and we'll be checking in with you periodically.
Thank you. It's
Thank you,
always
sir.
a pleasure, Mikee K. Always a
Always good to
pleasure.
have you on. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.